This is Steve Colano, and this is Confidential Remarks. For most people, a real estate purchase represents the largest financial commitment of their lives. Yet despite the scale of the debt being taken on, the specific mechanics of the closing process often remain the part of the deal the buyer understands the least. This lack of clarity is often supported by the way the industry describes itself. You are told that buyer representation is a free service, or that a specific commission percentage is simply the industry standard. These assumptions hold because of how the money moves. Commissions are typically baked into the final sale price and distributed through escrow. When you don't see the cost as a separate line item, it becomes difficult to track how those financial incentives might be shifting the recommendations you receive. When faced with hundreds of pages of legal disclosures and technical jargon, the natural response is to look for a shortcut. Most people solve this complexity by treating their agent as the absolute authority on every detail. Relying on that authority without a way to verify it creates a specific risk. It means the true cost of the transaction is determined by someone else's incentives, leaving you to pay the bill for fees that were never clearly defended. Changing this dynamic requires you to move from a passive participant to an active market force. You do that by walking into the room and requiring 3 specific money standards. We should be clear about what this costs. Asking for these standards creates immediate social friction. It can be awkward, and it will likely alienate agents who prefer the traditional way of doing business. This chart illustrates why that friction is a necessary investment. We are mapping your personal effort and social discomfort against the total financial risk of the deal. In the high-risk, low-effort quadrant, you avoid the uncomfortable conversation. You prioritize a smooth social interaction, but you maximize your exposure to undisclosed costs. The low-risk, high-effort quadrant is the opposite. By taking on the burden of a rigorous interview, you drastically reduce your financial exposure. That brief window of social friction is the highest return on investment activity available to a consumer. It is the only way to protect your leverage when hundreds of thousands of dollars are on the line. You can manage this process using a listing appointment scorecard, a mental checklist for every interview with a prospective agent. These standards dictate if you're represented or simply sold. Standard 1 is fee transparency. Require a written breakdown of who is paid, what amount, and by whom before signing. This provides clarity on the true cost, exposing hidden junk fees. The trade-off is you must be prepared to hold your ground. Some agents will dismiss this breakdown as unnecessary paperwork or just how things are done. Standard 2 is conflict disclosure. You require the agent to document any financial relationships with other parties in the deal. This exposes issues like dual agency, ensuring your advisor doesn't have a side deal conflicting with your interests. Identifying a conflict often requires you to walk away. You sacrifice speed and delay your timeline to find a truly independent advisor. Securing these first 2 standards actively removes the hidden agendas that many traditional operators rely on. The final part of the scorecard is often the most difficult to discuss. You have to interrogate how the agent is paid personally. Standard 3 is compensation disclosure. You require the agent to explain their pay mechanics, flat fee, percentage, or referral bonus. The goal is seeing if incentives distort advice. A percentage model, for instance, naturally encourages favoring a higher purchase price. Once you move past the idea of a standard rate, you take on a new responsibility. The burden of negotiating that fee shifts entirely to you. If an agent responds to these questions by trying to make you feel uninformed or difficult, pay attention. That defensiveness is a signal. A professional service provider who is confident in their value will happily justify their fee and explain their compensation structure in plain English. If a fee cannot be explained clearly, it cannot be defended honestly. These 3 money standards are more than a list of questions. They are a filter to determine who is actually qualified to represent your interests. There is a clear divide between representatives using this scorecard. The traditional gatekeeper relies on jargon, opaque fees, and defensiveness when questioned. The open access advisor provides standards up front, welcomes questions, and operates with transparent fees. To optimize the outcome of your purchase, this interview process is mandatory. It is the highest return on investment time spent in the entire transaction. If you prioritize convenience and avoid social friction, you will default to the traditional model. By making that choice, you knowingly accept the risk of misaligned incentives and hidden costs. The knowledge you need to avoid this situation is already free and public for anyone. The standards are clearly defined. The only variable left is your willingness to walk into the appointment and use that information. Embracing the friction of these standards means you stop being a target for hidden fees. You become the market force that forces industry change. This has been Confidential Remarks.